When I typically head into an interview for this series, I don't expect my guests to interview me.
How's your arc in getting into podcasts? How did you get into this zone of like architectural photography? Okay, what would be the focus on for when you do industrial shoots?
This is exactly what happened when I sat down with Deepak and Justine of the Architecture Story. Justine and Deepak open up in the next episode, but as soon as we hit record, Deepak took the opportunity to ask me about how I got started in photography and podcasting and my approach to both architecture and photography. This conversation directly leads into my interview of Justine and Deepak in the next episode, so stick around for that. It's really quite special. Welcome to Everything Comes Together. My name is Sreenag and I'm an architectural photographer based in Chennai, India. On this series, I speak with people in the architecture, photography and design communities, documenting their personal journeys, the challenges they overcame, and the most important incidents in their lives that made them who they are today.
We've known you for a few years already, and then we've seen the arc of, we've had many conversations, long ones and short ones. And so I'm just curious to see like, how's your arc in getting into podcasts? And you've done 20 episodes already. So how's your learning experience going from the first 5, next 5, 15 to 20? Like,
okay, so when you said getting into podcasts, right? Originally the podcast was supposed to be purely audio only. It wasn't supposed to be video at all. And the reason it became video is because if you're going to document any person's life and journey, you need a complete picture. You need to see their body language, you need to see their demeanor, you need to see them. So, if you want to see the work of you want to see any photographer or any architect speaking, especially if they're from US or Europe, you'll find some sort of footage. Most Indian creatives are not documented like that. Most creatives anywhere are not, but especially
in India.
So I thought rather than it be written or rather than it be only audio, it has to be video. So which means I needed to get comfortable being in front of the camera, which I'm not. I still cannot talk to camera unless I know that there is an immediate live audience. Let's say it's a workshop, I can talk to camera.
Yeah.
But when it's being recorded, I can't do it. So the first after I recorded the first 3 interviews, I was very comfortable speaking to people, so I could record it fine. But the minute it was the minute I had to speak to camera, like for the guest intro, I couldn't do it, and I couldn't do it for 2 hours. So I tried to record over and over in different ways, put up cue cards, put up like almost like a teleprompter. Nothing worked because I was just so self-conscious. That was the early experience with trying to get the first few episodes out. And then I decided to just do one line, which was, "Welcome to Everything Comes Together. My guest today is whoever it is." And that was the most that I could manage doing it. And then after that, I realized that no one needs to see my face up front. So then the intros changed after the first 3 or 4 episodes. The intros changed to a voiceover and pictures of their work. Everyone I interview is doing something that is visual. So putting up pictures or videos from their work while I give the introduction to them, that was the big evolution over the first few episodes. And then of course was the prep for the podcast has been the same, because
it always involved me doing my own research before I speak to the guest for the pre-interview, and then there's the pre-interview, because a lot of things that we talk about are not going to be documented anywhere else. They're not. You may do an interview about your work. So you may have done an interview after you enter a festival. You may have won some awards and you do an interview, but you don't talk about your childhood. You don't talk about influential people along the way who helped you. You don't always talk about going through a tough time and then finding your way out of it. And those things only come up in the pre-interview. And many times when I speak to a guest for the pre-interview, a lot of things come out of it that that are not going to be spoken of, that the guest may not have even thought about it for years. But it has influenced them. There you can, once they remember it, you can draw a direct line from that one obscure incident to what they do today.
Yeah.
And that has been something that has been a common thread throughout almost every interview so far.
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast.
Yeah.
To, unlike the times before, all the younger studios and also like mid to well-established studios are at a position where they have to present their work. They have to go speak about their work. They have to show images of their work. They have to, because the media space is quite loud.
Yeah.
Either you participate or you don't. That's personal call. But in general, that's the case. So that's interesting that you're presenting the opposite spectrum, because I'm also speaking large at the majority are not presenting their personal stories. They are presenting their
otherwise it becomes a very polished image of yourself, right? Because you don't want your brand. So since everyone that I speak with is running some sort of business or some sort of practice, right? And brand is really important. So you want to look your best, you want to sound your best. But it's only with that pre-interview, with the personal stories, you break those.
Makes them more human, right?
Sorry?
You show a little bit of vulnerability and it makes them more human, I guess.
The more vulnerable people get in the interview, the better it is. Or the more off script we go. Like, we didn't script this conversation. This was not part of the regular thing, right? But that really makes all the difference, because it's much more genuine when you don't think of it beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then do you think with your prep work or your research, because like you started with, you said it's not the projects or these are things that you don't read or hear. Many of the personal journeys you don't read or hear very easily. So you go pretty much blindfolded into these things, or do you do some sort of like research before you start your interviews?
I definitely do research to whatever I can. Not everyone has press interviews. Not everybody's website has background information about them. So it depends, Like for you guys, I could find articles where your work was featured. And especially when it came to articles about the grid, I could see a little bit more about you. But Deepak, you were a bit of a mystery as on a personal level, right? But for some people, they've done a lot of interviews before. Like, so a couple of episodes ago, I had done an interview with Bharat Ramamrutam. And he has done a ton of interviews. So actually, my interview with him was basically, he has done interviews before for many, many years. So for me, it was all about, it wasn't about talking too much about, it was not about talking photography at all, even though he is an architectural photographer for 30 years. It was more talking about what is his mindset going into a shoot. Now that, it depends on the publication. We don't know. I couldn't find very much about that from his point of view. So there's no research there other than actually speaking to him. And a lot of that speaking, we didn't talk about his thought process in detail beforehand. We talked about 100 other things, but the thought process was very much on the spot while we were actually doing the interview. So he was going into his thought process in real time, you know, and that was a lot of fun. And so those are things you can't research, and that's the best part.
And then how do you mentally prepare yourself, the thought process before?
That's why for now at least,
I'm just asking about the shoots, like when you do your shoot.
My thought process for a shoot?
Yeah.
So I'm very much a planning oriented person. So everything has to be planned and I need to have a backup plan. So my whole process, I'll run through this quickly because I'm sure we'll get to other fun stuff later. So it involves me getting a detailed brief from the client. So I want to understand the project. Basically, the client gives me the same presentation that they would give their client before starting work. So much like you did for the CPB design that you did, you gave me your concept.
Yeah.
I got to understand it from your point of view. And only once I do that do I visit the project. And when I visit the project, I'm looking at your concepts. Where did it come from? How has it been executed? What does each portion of that design, what function does it perform? How can I represent it to go along with the description or to go along with a sketch or a 3D render? Then what are the lighting conditions at the time? Do I need to carry lights? Is there enough natural light? When is the best time to do the shoot? What kind of housekeeping or styling or staging or whatever, what do I need to do? What does the client need to do? What permissions do we need if we need like access from other buildings to get a view of one project? So all of that is done during the site visit, and then I would give an outline of this in my proposal to the client. So by this point, I already have a bunch of shots ready in my head before I go in for the shoot. And then we go and
execute.
Yeah. So it's weird, I have had dreams of a shoot the night before, and in my dream I have completed the shoot. So when I go there, I need to ask.
You're sleepwalking in the morning.
No,
click.
Because I start shooting and then I keep telling my assistant, I need to do all these things. I'll give him a list of things that I need to shoot, and I tell him, make sure I've actually done it, because I don't know whether I've actually shot it or I've just dreamt it. So he needs to keep an eye, because I give him this list in advance just before we start, so it's still fresh in his memory. So I'll be like, I need to take that angle, the sunlight will be coming in at this angle, so that is when I need to shoot it, you remind me.
Do you also have a book next to your bed?
No, I don't wake up. So once I sleep, I'm out. So
you're one of those lucky ones.
No, not always. It's more like I remember my shots. So I remember almost every picture that I've taken, and I associate it with something that was happening around the time that I shot it or around the time I was editing it. So I cannot forget that.
So cool.
So it's like if I talk a lot during a shoot, so if I was taking a particular shot and I will remember the conversation that I had at that time. So those two are linked. So it's hard for me to forget one or the other. If there was only the shot by itself, I may forget it. If there was only the conversation by itself, I will forget it. But when they're together, it sort of gets captured in.
Nice. And then what's your also like, how did you get into this zone of like architectural photography, and how did you in your early days, like how did you sustain yourself in that zone? And that's also the time of DSLR, and everyone was carrying around a DSLR, and you know, like
right. That was so I started early. I've told you this, right? I started when I started working when I was 19, and I also looked a lot younger than that. So it was very difficult to convince clients that I'm qualified to do the job that I said I'm going to do. But how I got interested in it is because I've been interested in design and architecture from a very early age. So when I'm interested in something, I read about it, and sometimes I often get obsessed with whatever I'm interested in. So I try and know as much about it as possible. So when it came time, I always knew I was going to do photography. That was never in doubt. It's just that when I was in college, I thought I had to put architecture and photography together. I didn't know at that time that there were almost no architectural photographers in India. When I say almost no, there were definitely a few, but not so many that I knew I could call them and ask them for advice or an internship. I didn't know anybody in Madras, that was for sure. I knew Bharat Ramamrutam, and he was not in Madras at that time, if I'm correct. So it was hard getting my foot in the door. So my way of going about it was I went in a very roundabout way. I thought I have no photography experience as I step out of college. So I'm going to come up with a concept of selling architects and interior designers custom made prints. And then they use that in those houses or offices. And then I tell them, if you want, I can shoot your space for you.
Started with the idea of doing a print.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I had my first exhibition in 2006.
The one in Netherlands?
No. The one in 2006 was it was very much in Madras.
Yeah.
So it was at an art gallery here. It was at Lakshana Art Gallery. So that's where I had an exhibition, and so the idea behind that was to invite interior designers and architects to come in, see what I have to offer. Although those prints most of them would never be used by anybody because they were really crazy.
But it worked, right?
Sorry?
But it worked.
It worked on two levels. I broke even at the exhibition, which was great, but also it got me some press. So because of that, it gave me a little bit more legitimacy in the eyes of architects. So I started getting some work. It was nowhere near the kind of work that I'm getting today. But I started getting some work, and it slowly started from there. And things really took a hit in 2008 with the financial crisis. It was a very bad year. But after that, it took a year and a half to recover from that. And from then, I have seen more steady growth.
Nice. So you were saying you did the prints, so that we didn't know that. And also you exhibited somewhere in Netherlands, right?
So in Amsterdam, that was a couple of years ago, and that was at the World Architecture Festival. So I didn't exhibit there. I entered the Architectural Photography Award, and they partnered with WAF, and the shortlisted pictures were displayed there. So it wasn't my exhibition, but one of my photos was exhibited there, and that was great
That's
because
still you exhibited. It was
Yes.
not a solo exhibition.
it was not a solo exhibition. It was one picture. So there were 20 shortlisted photographs, and that was a really great experience going there and meeting architects. I was the only photographer.
And which year was this?
2018.
2018. Yeah. Oh, but do you think it would have helped? Or do you have friends and family there, or how did you come about it?
How did I go there?
No, how do you come about it? Like, or you just saw an open call, or?
No, so the Architectural Photography Award is open to anybody.
Yeah.
It's an online entry, so that was easy. I didn't know whether I'd get shortlisted. I didn't expect anything from my first time entry. But it had already been 13 years since I'd started working. So it wasn't something completely new to me to shoot, professional work. But when I entered, I didn't expect anything of it. But it got shortlisted, and then had to work with the organizers to get access to the festival, because the festival is really expensive. So getting in is not easy unless you can pay a lot of money. So they sort of got me a pass, like a one-day pass. So I could go there, I could meet some architects, go on a little bit of a tour as part of a group.
So cool.
So that was a really good experience. Because the conversations with architects there and the conversation with architects here is the same. I found no difference at all. Probably what they would have expected from the day-to-day work here is different than what it actually is. But when you talk about architecture, it's the same. So that was nice to see.
Yeah. So I'm not sure even your assistant Mohan would know all this background story of like how
No, Mohan is very new to working with me. So, so Jilani would be much more informed since he's been around for over 200 shoots with me.
Yeah.
So even for him, I think a lot of these things were new.
Yeah. So the reason we kind of like started on this tangent is also to, give you a preface of how we work.
Right.
Like, it's not a given, like nothing for us. It's like sort of like it's a given. It's not, okay, this is your requirement X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But rather like we ask a series of questions. We ask a series of, questions to ourselves first, questions to the other party first, and questions to the other, the extended circle. And first we start with like, where do we position ourselves with respect to this or that, and how do we respond based on that? So that basically the question is sort of the trigger point for the process in general.
Yeah.
So that's why I was trying to understand what, to give you a preface of like to hear your journey first, to like, how did you, okay, now it's a podcast, but what did you do before a podcast, and how did you arrive at doing a podcast? And so it seems like you have always looked at alternative ways to like further your work, starting from the exhibition at Lakshana and presenting your work outside, and now podcast.
I didn't even think of the exhibition as an alternate way of doing it. It just seems natural. You take photographs, you need to find a place to exhibit. The internet was barely anything in 2005. I had a website, but most people didn't. There was no Instagram or social media. So the only way is to literally put prints up on a wall and get the press to cover it and get people to come in. So I probably wouldn't have done an exhibition now. But at that time, it didn't feel like it was an unusual way of going about it.
Yeah. So, and then like when you work with, you had this massive transition from doing shoots for industrial setting, where the focus probably was on like. What would be the focus on for when you do industrial shoots to show the machinery?
To focus on the factory, the machinery, the production processes, the people who work there, and then the smaller details will be to make sure they're wearing their safety gear,
Right.
Making sure the factory is up to scratch in the pictures, because it needs to show the
Quality control.
Yeah, it needs to show not just the quality control, but that company maintains certain standards. And almost all my industrial photography is B2B. So the only people who are going to be looking at it are their potential clients who would insist on a lot of standards to be maintained. So yeah, that was the focus
it's
there.
It's interesting, like on a factory, industrial setting, where it's not necessarily meant for living, they focus on people and how they occupy the space, and they want to like
but there how they occupy the space is very different. It's more like how many it's a lot about efficiency there of how that operation can run. Whereas with architecture, if I include people, it's about the experience of the space.
So are you going to experiment on that as well, like how people experience with the photos that you did for the the photo biennale one? I think you were lucky at some point. You had like a lot of students come in.
A lot of people walked in unexpected. But that was good because we had people for scale. And one of the important parts of your brief about the Biennale exhibit was how people flow through the space, right? And you could see through those various arched doorways. You could see through. You could see people coming in and then walking through and things like that. So because there was an unexpected group, I got shots of that. So even when we shot your model, you had those little miniature people in the model. And here I was able to give you real people to show how your scale model has actually been executed and how it actually worked. And that works out sometimes that way. This has been part 1 of my conversation with Justine and Deepak. Stand by for part 2. It's coming up right now. You can watch other full episodes and curated playlists at www.everythingcomestogether.com. Please subscribe to Sreenag Pictures on YouTube and like or leave a comment for this video. You can listen to the audio podcast by subscribing to Everything Comes Together on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and leave a 5-star review. If you like this episode, please tell a friend about it and help get the word out about this show. The Everything Comes Together video and audio series is produced by Sreenag Pictures. Post-production by Tangaraj, production assistance by G.S. Mohan, and the original music by Ashray Harishankar from Escapist Music. Until we meet again with another fascinating guest, you can reach me on Instagram @Sreenag or at everythingcomestogether.com. See you soon.